Welcome back, Naughty Nation. Today, I'm gonna walk you through step by step how to build countertops like a pro. I'm gonna walk you through the steps A to Z and everything in between in detail so that when you're done with this series, you too can build countertops like a pro.
The Naughty Artisan.
All right, in this video, you'll notice we've built a template here, this white material that you see here. We go out to the job site and we create templates that we use to bring back to the shop. So at the end of the day, we're really just professional tracers. And what I'm doing here is on this particular template, we're adding an inch to the back. So I'm going through and I'm adding little crow's feet marks. So I know exactly where to put my extension on my back line. And you'll see me mark these all out, and then I'll make a straight line so we can line up our template. All right, so there I've got my straight edge. I'm using my crow's feet to get right through the center, and I'm gonna draw a nice line there. It's added an extra inch of depth off the back of my countertop. So I have that little bit of extra that we're adding to the build of this one. But don't look too closely at my shop. This is our shop, we build in it. It's a real functioning shop. So it's messy like a real functioning shop. Our cleaning person hasn't come for the day. Well, actually our cleaning person's making a video right now, so they weren't able to clean the shop. All right, I've got all the lines drawn. Now what I'm doing is I'm lining up the back of my template because we added an inch. I'm gonna use these clamps. I'm gonna clamp this down so we have a nice and straight line to trace out. So you'll see me line up my corners right here. I'm gonna get this speed clamp. We're gonna clamp that baby down right there. And we're gonna clamp the rest of this down as well. Keeps us nice and square when we come in here. When we clamp down all our template, we don't want any wiggle room. We want it to be super precise. We don't want it to move around. It really helps us. So when we go to put the countertops in, fits like a glove. It's perfect. Now I'm tracing out the shape of my template there. This particular one's an L shape, which is pretty common when you're building countertops out. This is a kitchen countertop that we're building for our customer. Now, if you look right there, how I have the template hanging up, I want you to pay attention to what we do next and how we add an extension to that. So first off, I'm putting an X on the side. That's my offcut side. I always do that. I like to keep really careful notes so that once I've got my template traced out, I know exactly what I need to do and I'm not cutting the wrong side of the line or cutting the wrong shape out. Now that I've got my template traced, I'm gonna remove my clamps right there. And then if you'll see next, I'm gonna pull this off. I'm gonna double check all of my measurements. All right, now that I've checked that, I'm gonna cut these out. I'm just using the handy jigsaw in this case. A lot of times we use a track saw as well. The track saw was broken at the moment, so we have a hand saw or a jigsaw that we're using right now. Okay, right here, I had to add an extra inch off the back, so I'm just lining up my measurement right there, using the straight edge, putting it right on an inch, and then I'm using the back of the ruler. So that I have it, you'll see me, I'll line this up right here, and that'll give me the extra distance that I needed off of the template right there. Because we're adding 3/4 inch, that's what I was trying to show you right there, just keeping notes for myself, plus 3/4 of an inch, and that's what we added. And I'm gonna scribble out the line I don't want to cut, and then I put an X where I do want to cut. So I'm gonna cut right along that straight line there so that I have a nice, clean, perfect cut. Now I've got that drawn, cut the rest of this front of this L out. And the finishing cut's always so satisfying. Trim off this end piece here so we're all squared up with the length that we need. We'll go address that extra piece we've got to add to this. All right, I'm gonna put my template back on and put it into place. I'm gonna line this up. We're getting ready to add our extra piece that overhangs there so that we have, when we build it, it'll be one seamless countertop. Now, it doesn't mean there's not seams in it. It just means you won't see seams as a customer. Underneath, we do have seams, so I'm gonna show you how we're gonna make those seams and how we'll address those seams in this video as well. And on that edge that's overhanging, I would like to note that what I did is I kept a factory edge. So that's when I bought the board, it was already cut perfectly straight. I knew I was gonna add to it. And I like to take factory edge to factory edge. So when I put the two together, it's a perfectly straight surface. It makes it a lot easier. I don't have to worry about a cut or a bad cut. Everything lines up just square and we knock it out. So I've taken a factory edge on this board and I've matched it up to the factory edge of the countertop that we're building. And I'm going to go ahead and clamp them sur level. So I use clamps to put the two boards together at the seam sur level. And I'm gonna take my template and I'm gonna draw out the remaining shape that we need to do on that as well. That'll be the little piece that we cut out to match up with our template. Extend our back line where we had, so we got a perfectly straight line. When you have a really long straight edge like that, a good tip is I can take it on both sides and I'm able to line it up nice and straight and end up with the same line. Just like that, you'll see that it runs right into our cut and that's just a nice little clean line. So when we get in there with our saw, it makes our work quick. I'd also like to note when I am cutting, I always take the line. What I mean by take the line is when I'm done cutting, I don't want to see the black line that I put down with the Sharpie marker anymore. I like to cut just a little bit, a kerf length short, so I have a little bit of wiggle room, place to put the caulk when we hang it in. So you'll see that our motto in our shop is take the line, take the line. We're always taking the line. So you'll see me doing that here as well. And here we go on the back side, taking this line too. No lines will be left. And just like that, that piece matches up beautifully. So look at that, that's the piece that we'll add on to our existing countertop. I'm gonna double check it against our template again. See that I've got a good fit there. And then I'm gonna go through and mark this. I am crazy about marking this stuff. So I'm gonna mark the tops, the fronts, the sides, any bit of information that might be handy for me to know without that template on, I'm gonna put on there. You'll see me draw arrows, like that arrow to the front. I wanna make sure that everything is lined up so that I don't have any questions. I do this because we're gonna flip this over and work on the bottom at one point. And if you don't make careful measurements, it's really easy to build this thing mirror image. So I'm crazy about that. This mark right here, this is the center line for our sink. It's an important mark. So I have that there for the future notice. And you'll notice here I'm writing cabinets are on this side. Anything that I write front on is something that will be facing out towards the customer. So there could be both sides could actually be a front. It just means it's a visible exposed edge, so we'll want to take care of that. There's going to be a wall that I'm writing out here, so don't worry about the back of that, those kind of things. But I'm marking the work surface out completely, so there's no question on what I need to do with this piece as I'm building it once I remove the template on. At this point, the template is pretty much done. I won't need it anymore. We'll double check it at the end just to make sure everything fits and is according to what we built out. But with the information I've got written there and the way we've already built this piece out, we shouldn't have to use it again. And once again, there's that center line of the sink. So when I'm lining up a sink, what I want to do is pay attention. I don't pay attention to where their existing sink is. What I want to do is their cabinet will be there, and I line up with the center of their cabinet door. So as they come together, I'm going to get the mark there, and I'm going to mark that on my template, and that's where we're going to draw our center line for our sink. So when we cut it out, our hole lines out specifically and perfectly with that cabinet and looks clean. Now I've done that, I'm going to flip this baby over. I like to flip it one direction. You'll see me bring the other piece over. Just keep everything lined up so I don't have any questions. I know exactly what it is. And then I'm gonna build out the underneath portion of this. It's really important. It's gonna keep our countertop solid. You're gonna see me take this piece. I'm gonna flip it over just like it had done a flip. Bring my sawhorses over, line that baby up. Super anal about this process because I want to build it perfect every time. And if you get this process down, if you follow my process exactly the way I'm teaching, you will have a flawless result. You won't ever have to worry about your countertops. So I'm doing here is I'm marking lines. These are where I'm gonna put my pocket holes. So I'm gonna screw pocket holes on the bottom side of this. And so I like to mark where they are. Then I'm gonna put an X, I'm gonna alternate sides. And where the X mark is, that's the side that I put the hole in that I'm gonna screw into so that the two are pulling into each other as I'm doing the work. So I've got my pocket hole jig out here, and we're just gonna drill away. So we're gonna take our jig, we're gonna clamp it down to the board so it's nice and tight, it's not gonna wiggle on us. I've already set the depth on this bit here. That's what that little collar is that you're seeing there. So this is set up for 3/4 inch MDF. That's the size of the wood that we're using. So it's 3/4 inch thick MDF, and it's drawn just the right size hole so that when we screw the two pieces together, the depth is perfect. All right, just like we did the one side, we're gonna take the extra piece, we're gonna put our pocket holes in there as well. Some people like to do one, I like to do the two, just for a little extra strength. You know, you don't really get a whole lot of strength. You're not gonna get tensile strength out of it. You're just gonna keep your board lined up perfectly so that it doesn't create an uneven surface when you're working with it. We're gonna do some other things to reinforce that here that you'll see in a minute. All right, now that I've got my pocket holes all drilled out, I'm gonna clamp it. Now the clamps hold it level with each other. And these screws are 1.25 inches, which is important when you're putting the two together. That's as much as I can to dig into the meat of the other board without pushing through to the other side and creating a problem for myself. So I've got 1.25 inch Craig screws there, and I'm just drilling them in so that we have a nice tight and flush surface. I like to do both ends first and then work my ways in through the middles. All right, what you see me here, right there is where our seam is. So I've got a large board. Now this is the bottom of our countertop. I'm gonna go a good minimum of 6 inches past our seam or more. So it's just a piece of scrap I have. We always have scraps and offcuts from building other projects. I'm just gonna line this up right here, and I'm going really far over our seam. Our seam was only like 3 inches off the end. It looks like I've got about 18 inches there. So I'm gonna clamp this, we're gonna glue it, we're gonna cut the shape out so it fits, and then we've got a nice supported from the underside seam. So I don't worry about the seams too much, where we don't really break it. And after we've got our pocket screws all leveled up and we got it there, we're gonna put this under the bottom. Anytime there's a seam, we're gonna really go both sides of the seam with the MDF and then screw it in nice and tight. You'll see we'll glue and screw it, and away we go. But that's how we support our seams. So when we're moving around the shop or when they go to get installed, we don't have a countertop that breaks at a weak point. Another thing is if you don't support your seams just right, and there's even just a little bit of flex, you'll end up bending a line along that seam. it looks like you took some plastic and you bent it and then put it out straight again. You'll have that crease, it'll never go away. So we've learned over the years to really, really support those seams so they're just rigid and stiff. The rest of the countertop might move, it's okay, because it's MDF and we're not beating it up, but where that seam is, we just want it rigid with no movement, and so that's why we build them this way. Now you'll notice I've left a little gap along the back, and you'll see why I did that, because we're gonna be running some edges through there. But for now, we've just lined up the front and the corner, and I'm using Titebond 1. That's the type of glue we use. It's cheap and it has a really good strength. Once it dries, the strength on it's really good. So we'll put it in place. We're gonna glue and screw our extra bottom piece to the top piece, and then we're gonna let that dry, then we'll end up pulling these screws out. I like to glue, when I'm screwing in my board, I like to get all the edge and then the centers as well. If you don't screw those centers in real tight, sometimes the glue doesn't get pressed as flat, or you'll end up having a spot and you end up with like a little bit of hump in the middle. You don't want that. It doesn't make it good for when you're trying to set your countertops on the cabinetry. There we go. Now I've got some brad nails I'm gonna run through. They're 1.25" brad nails. I'm just gonna nail those all in to help hold that in place until the glue sets. All right, these are the strips that I was telling you about. We use a 2-inch MDF that we've cut to squares, and then we run this around the entire perimeter of our piece underneath. So you're gonna see me measuring these off, cutting them to size, and then we're gonna glue and staple these on the entire length of the project. All right, now that I've got that, what I'll do is I use my finger there to line those edges up, and I'll pop the first screw or first brad nail. The wood's a little flexible, so I'll line it up so it's nice and straight. And then my end, hold that down, 2 in the end, and we'll just pop a few more brad nails in just to hold that into place. Our real strength doesn't come from the screws or the brad nails at the end, it really comes from the glue once it's all the way dried up. And I'm just making a note right there that you can see it's a 2-inch strip that we cut. So every bit of scrap gets used up in one way or another in our shop. So if you have weird, odd cut shapes, we'll end up as 2-inch trim pieces like you see here. Here I'm gonna butt it up, I'm gonna put my glue on, add my next piece. So I'm just showing you there on my brad nail gun, I use 1.25" inch nails in my gun so that I can go through the bottom piece as well. So I use 2 3/4 inch pieces of MDF, and we stack those together, it gives us 1.5 inches, which is standard countertop height, and it works out perfectly. So just use the 1.25" brad nails when you're popping them in. You don't have to worry about going through and repairing stuff on your surface prior to pouring your epoxy. And I'm back at it with the trim pieces. Now these corners, these are kind of interesting. You'll notice all we care about is the front portion. You're gonna see we're gonna add facing to it. So we're not gonna bring it all square and lined up. We just wanna close off that front piece. All right, we're gonna line that up. As you see, you're just touching. I have no concern with that piece there. Grab my brad nailer and we'll pop that one into place. All right, we're almost done here. All those bottom pieces here. And I'm gonna flip this countertop over. We've got our bottom structure built, and there we go. So now we'll be working on the top for the rest of this. I'm gonna use these sawhorses to support my project underneath as I go. All right, now that I've got our piece flipped over, I'm going to sand out our edges and our top. And as you see there, I'm letting you know we use a 60 grit sandpaper in our hand sander there. It's just a standard DeWalt palm sander, and away we go. What I'm trying to do here is the pieces I want flush and even and nice and square. So I'm just gonna go around the entire edge of this piece and then just sand it out really quick. MDF sands like butter. It's really nice material to work with when it comes to shaping and cutting. So I'm just gonna go around the edge there. As you see, I'm gonna line it up. I've got a little bit of overhang, those kind of things, but when we're done sanding, it'll be nice and smooth. All right, sometimes to speed stuff up, I'll grab my trusty angle grinder with a flap disc on here, and as you can see, I'm writing out, I'm using a 60 grit flap disc on this, and this will just speed things along. Sometimes when I'm using a jigsaw rather than a track saw, I'll end up with a little bit of waves, and this just gets them out quicker. If you don't have an angle grinder, that's okay. You can go buy one for like 10 bucks, or you can just use a hand sander like I was before. It just takes a little longer. Now some of you are gonna see that there's some little notches and those kind of things in there. I don't really worry about that. What I'm really worried about is the two pieces lining up, because we're gonna put some face plates on this so that we have really perfect edges on these. So really what I'm gonna do is just get the junk off, anything that's gonna push my face plate away. I'm not too concerned about the little divots in that's left by this angle grinder here. These are my face plates right here. They work out beautifully. We cut them out of 1/4 inch MDF. And then we cut them to 1.5 inches thick so they fit perfectly in front of the two pieces that we've done right there. This here's the secret. A lot of guys are gonna be mad that I'm showing you guys, but we're not gonna hold back. Like I said, it's 1/4 inch MDF cut to 1.5 inches thick that we will then place in front of our two pieces that we just cut. So I'm gonna use some glue up on here. We'll use our trusty brad nailer. We're gonna attach this to the face. I only put these on the faces that are marked front. These are the outside faces. These are the parts that are gonna be showing that a customer will see. So we want them nice and clean. This makes it so it's absolutely seamless and gorgeous. I don't spare on the glue. Like I said, the strength comes from the glue, and we don't want anything coming out. These brad nails are gonna hold it in place in the meantime. I like to do a couple across the top, a couple across the bottom, so we have nice and flush glue up. All right, now that I've got all my front facings on, I'm gonna go over the top with my 60 grit on my hand sander again. And once again, now I do care about divots on this one, so I'm gonna stick with the sander, and I'm gonna sand these flush so that there's no line, no seams, no nothing when I go to pour this countertop. All right, now that I've got everything sanded, what I'm gonna do, I've got some auto body filler here. Now, a lot of people like to go to Home Depot or Lowe's or whatever big box stores in your area, and they'll buy the Bondo brand. So this is not Bondo, it's the same stuff. It's just an off-brand amount. Here's a pro tip that you should know. So rather than going to the big box store, go find the people that sell to the body shops in your area. So in my area, it's called CTI Industrial Supply. And that's where all the guys who paint your cars after a crash and those kind of things. If you go there, you'll be able to buy lightweight body filler, just like we're using here, really, really cheap. This big old thing, I paid 24 bucks for it. A quart of Bondo at Home Depot, where I'm at right now, is like $32. So it's huge saving, goes a long way. We use a lot of this. I'm mixing it up here. I've got my hardener here. I'm mixing it up, getting it ready to go. Then I'm gonna take the spreader and clean it off, and then this is the stuff that's gonna make it perfect. So now I've got my facings on. I'm gonna grab some Bondo. I'm gonna grab some body filler. Everywhere there's a seam, I'm gonna cover it with filler, just like that. So there's my piece we added on. We're gonna cover that nice and thick there. I try and remove as much material as I can so I don't have to sand it off later. Then I'm gonna hit all of the front faces on top. Anywhere there's a seam, I'm gonna fill this with the body filler here so we don't have any issues. And by issues, I mean things that are gonna show through in the epoxy when we come to pour it. Now, preparation is key, just like everything else in life. Properly building and preparing your countertop prior to pouring it is gonna save you a lot of time. So if you can see it with your naked eye, once it's done, you're gonna be able to see it through the epoxy. If you can feel it, you're gonna be able to feel it through the epoxy. So as we go through this, you'll see me sand. You'll actually see me taking my hand and rubbing it off. Imagine looking away, rubbing back and forth. If I can feel the seam or if I can feel the divot I'm trying to fill, it's not done properly. I either need to sand some more if it's a raised up piece, or if it's still a divot, I need to add some more body filler to make sure it's definitely flat in the way you want it. And if you take the time to do those little bit of extra things, you're really going to have a good result. You'll see right here, I'm coming around the sides, even where I had the brad nails. I'm just giving a little kiss of body filler, and then we're just pulling it over. It's gonna help us in our finished product a ton. All right, if I look a little awkward doing this, it's because I'm trying to make sure you guys got a good video shot while I'm in there, and sometimes I gotta hold my body and hand a little bit differently, so don't give me any grief about it in the comments. I know who you are. And my body filler is setting up, so I'm gonna bang this out as quick as I can, fill these holes in. I'm almost to the end. Let's see if I make it. Come on, come on. You're a professional, act like it. Let's go. We're making videos here. Go, 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 go. Oh yeah, got it right at the end. That'll set up and we are good to go. Okay, here we are. We're probably 45 minutes later. My Bondo has dried. I'm gonna take that same 60 grit on my hand sander. We're gonna sand this whole thing out till it's completely smooth. Any edge I can see in the Bondo, anything like that, I'm gonna sand it so it's just really, really smooth. As I do this process, watch my hands in, you'll see me filling over the seams. Also, I've done this a lot, so I've got a good feel for it. This is super important. This is gonna ensure that we have a really, really quality finished piece when we get around to pouring our epoxy. Still sanding away, want to make sure all of that excess Bondo is gone. So here I am along the seam, really giving it the once over, make sure we get all of that done. All I really care about is the seam, that it's nice and flat. See how I'm feeling right there? I don't really care about the edges, all the stuff I've got a good 3 inches past there. I just want to make sure when I run my hand over that, I don't feel any texture or anything, but just a nice smooth surface. I'm gonna clean up my fronts as well. Those clean up really, really easy where I've got the nail holes. As a little tip is if after you paint this with your bonding primer, you discover that you missed a hole, every once in a while there's a random hole you miss. A good tip to use, if you just take a little bit of caulk and you put it on your finger, you wipe it on that hole, let it dry up, give it a light sanding, it'll take care of that too. Bondo works better prior to prepping. After I've already primed it, if I throw Bondo on it, it seems to like gum it up. So we'll use that as a little tip. And that's just like last second you missed a quick one, you can pop that on and have some good results with as well. We're in the home stretch here, getting that last bit of Bondo off so it's nice and smooth so we can move to the next step in our process. Okay, now as you see there, I'm going to use a 3/8 inch round over bit right there. Sometimes I use an 1/8 inch. In this case, it's a 3/8 inch. And we're just going to give a nice smooth round over to our edges there. This gives it a really, really nice finishing touch. The epoxy is going to flow over it beautifully. You're just not going to have it run up to the edge and stop. It's going to run right over. It's going to help with our effects and everything. It's a really, really nice, clean, modern look that we've been using a lot lately. All right, now I've used 220 on a hand sanding pad here, and I'm just gonna go over these edges that I just rounded, and I'm gonna close off the grain. And what I mean by that is I'm gonna make sure it's nice and smooth to the touch. If you don't do this last part on the corners that you've rounded over, you'll tend to get these little bumps that pop out. It's the wood grain popping out from your primer. So it doesn't take hardly any time at all, but it makes a huge impact on the finish. I like the mesh grit when I'm doing that compared to the standard like sandy grip. All right, here's where we're gonna finish it out. We're gonna use, I like this particular brand. It's only at Lowe's. They don't have anything similar that I've found at Home Depot. I don't live in the Midwest. I don't know what Menards has, or if you're watching this somewhere else, sorry. But what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna coat this really, really well with a bonding primer here. The reason I like a bonding primer compared to like a regular paint, it's just a little bit thick and it gives me like a nice hard, almost crust to work with, and it's called extreme adhesion, so it bites onto that board really well. We missed it, but I blew it off with a blower to make sure there was no loose dust on it prior to rolling this out. And I'm gonna put it nice and generous. Now I still want it smooth, so you'll see me employing good practices of painting. So I'll roll one way, then I'll cross roll the other direction to make sure we've got a nice smooth surface, so that when we get around to pouring our epoxy, it will be just perfect and ready to have just a beautiful effect put in. Make sure you hit your edges nicely when you're putting on your bonding primer as well. And it is just gorgeous. Now, if I'm gonna do a light color, this bonding primer is a bright white. So if I'm putting like Carrera marble we get all the time, I'm not gonna bother painting this because we've got a white substrate underneath. Now, if I'm gonna do something dark, like a Galaxy Granite or a dark marble or something like that, I'm gonna go ahead and use just some paint. I'll just get a quart of paint. If I'm doing dark colors, I typically like to go with a color called Limousine Black, and we'll roll it out, and then we'll pour our effect over underneath that. If I'm doing an earth tone, I'll use a brown, like an Ethiopia brown or something like that. Or if it's black, I'll use a dark. But you want your substrate to be close to the color of the epoxy you're pouring. For instance, if I were to pour a black over this white substrate, the white would show through a little bit. I'd have like a gray look to it. So, you know, I always put the bonding primer down first. So I've got a nice, strong adhesion. It blocks out any little imperfection that might have been there. And then we put the substrate as needed. Right now, the colors are light colors, so we're not painting a lot of them, but that's just important information to have. All right, we're putting the finishing strokes on right here, and just like that, see that little nail hole I missed there on the back? That's one where you would just put a little white caulk on, put it over, let it sit 15 minutes, give it a light sanding, and we'd be able to move on to the next level, or the next step. All right, just like that, we're finished up. Thank you for joining us in this series on how to build countertops. I hope you found it valuable. If you did, we don't ask for money, but we do ask for one thing in exchange. We ask you to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and ring the bell so when we have more helpful information, you're the first to find out.
The Naughty Artisan. The Naughty Artisan.
Oh, that's a good shot right there. Give that cameraman a raise. Actually, cut that out. We don't want any of that video evidence of that anywhere. For watching our series. This is part 2 on how to build a countertop. Obviously, some of this video or audio, if it's redundant or whatever, just 69 it.
Also, I don't know if you.
Do we 69 it or 86 it?
86 it.
69, that's something else, right? And that's my butt. Corey, you drinking Bud Light? I mean, what's with this shot here, man?